Welcome back, ChangeMakers. This week we are talking about different player types and how to find them. We're going to go over some of the more common ways to figure out who the player is, and then we're going to talk about kind of why those fall down, and then I'll give you an actual version of something you could use to figure those out when you're just running a quick session. We're going to start with GNS theory. So GNS is an old theory based on design philosophy surrounding tabletop role-playing games. This theory is very detailed and things that I personally don't think really matter towards why you would make a game this way, or what kind of goes into making a tabletop role-playing game. However, I do agree with the resulting GNS theory triangle that came out of it. Even the person who created GNS theory then abandoned GNS theory in favor for the big model, which is even more detailed than the GNS theory. So I'm not going to talk about that one. I'm just going to talk about this. So GNS stands for Gamist, Narrativist, and Simulationist. Gamists are players who like mechanics. They like those crunchy systems. They might be min-maxers, and they're interested in all the rules and how to play around with that whole process. That's a gamist. A narrativist, on the other hand, prefers those fluffy systems. They tend to enjoy world building and making their characters and just generally understanding the whole plot and the narrative of the game they're playing. Simulationists are kind of a mix of the two. They are the players who are more interested in those nitty-gritty details. If they're playing a first-person shooter, they care about the details and if it feels like a real gun that they're shooting. If they're playing a role-playing game, they might be playing at the blacksmith so that they can actually go through the whole process of what it takes to make a sword or something like that. That's a simulationist. Altogether in this triangle, the player is somewhere in that triangle, and that's how you identify who they are. The next most common type is Bartle Types. Bartle Types were created as a way to try and categorize MMO players. MMO stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Game. So, this test figured out 4 different categories of players in an MMO. There are achievers, explorers, socializers, and killers. The achievers identified with the diamond from a deck of cards. These guys are interested in collecting gold, in collecting the most of something, in getting the coolest title. They're all about achievements. This is where the Xbox achievements thing comes from. It's from this. Next you have explorers, identified with a spade because they're digging through the world. They're more interested in the story. They want to know if they can get any hidden content. They're interested in the world that they're gaming in. After that, you have socializers. These guys didn't join the game to join the game. They joined the game so that they could play with their friends. They're really interested in the social aspect. It's part of why they're identified with the hearts suit. Socializers are definitely all about connecting with other players. Finally, you have the killers. Killers are identified with a club because they like clubbing people over the head. They're more commonly known as griefers. These tend to be players who want to get one up on everybody else. They will beat you down because they think it's fun to antagonize you and get you to do things that you really shouldn't do. They'll goad you into losing all of your money in game, or trick you into doing something else. They'll bring you out to a PvP zone or player versus player zone and then kill you so that they can get all your loot just for fun. These are the killer type. So then there's Meyers-Briggs. Meyers-Briggs is the most common one that I've seen. And in this one, there are 16 different categories that the players would test into, and then they would find out what kind of characteristics they had and kind of who they were as a person. So when they fit into a group, they kind of knew where they were how they would attack problems. Myers-Briggs is based off of 4 different categories. It's, are you extroverted or introverted? Are you sensing or intuitive? Are you thinking or feeling? And are you judging or perceiving? What type of person are you? So now I talked to you about the most common types of personality tests that you could run. Now I'm going to talk about why you really shouldn't be using those. GNS theory had a lot of trouble with the fact that it didn't separate player motivation and player behavior. They treated them as if they were the same thing when they are clearly not. This shows up in things like, do you like puzzles? Are you a gamist or a narrativist for liking puzzles? Are you more interested in it because you want to play with the mechanics in an interesting way? You want to mess with the rules in odd new ways? Or are you more interested in the narrative? Do you want to explore the world in a new interesting way and just puzzle your way around that? Which one are you? It is very vague. If you're playing as a blacksmith, what are you doing it as a simulationist? Are you trying to explore the exact process of everything you're doing, or are you trying to explore what it's like in a day, what a day in the life of a blacksmith is really about? Are you trying to get into character and do all of that? Then you're probably more of a narrativist. The fact that this is so grayed out makes it really easy to just hand wave things away of, oh, well, you're somewhere on the spectrum, so that's fine. But that's not helpful when you're trying to put a player in a box, so to speak. If you're a gamist, now you only do gamist things. Or if you're a self-identified narrativist, now you're all the stuff the CM is going to be planning for you is going to be narrativist heavy, which may not be what you're actually interested in. You may be somewhere directly in the middle. And how do you plan a game for that? So Bartle Types had a huge issue when they actually tested how this worked with 7,000 MMO players. They had them all take the test and figure out who they were and correlated it with what kind of stuff they were doing in-game. They found that the Explorer type didn't even exist. Not only did it not exist, it didn't show up in the test, it also, all of the subcategories that helped identify it didn't even correlate to each other. It didn't test into being a working theory. It ended up disproving itself. If you can't even have one type of it, what does that actually make? People have since tried to adjust it into other things. There's the Kiersey temperaments that combine the Meyers-Briggs with the Bartle types to try and classify players into different groups. This follows more like the 4 humors of really old philosophy that gets used more for storytelling than it does for actual understanding of how people work. So Myers-Briggs has a lot of issues with it, actually. For starters, it's not a scientific thing, even though it tried to sell itself as one. It's only been published in the psychology paper that it's affiliated with. It feels more like a fortune cookie kind of thing than it does an actual scientific recognition of personality. Additionally, scientists don't even know what personality actually is, let alone how to measure it. Personality falls under philosophy more than it does under psychology at this point. So something like this couldn't possibly measure it accurately. And it doesn't really. A lot of these feel really similar. They have a lot of similar characteristics. It's more like looking at your zodiac sign and going, yeah, that's me. So if you absolutely have to do some kind of personality test, you're just really pressed for time or whatever it happens to be, or you just feel more comfortable doing that, rather than using the previous examples, I would much rather you use the Big 5 one, the Big 5 model. This one is based off of 5 scales rather than just set categories. It's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And this just kind of identifies how they interact in any given situation. And it can change, just like all the other ones can. But it's a little easier to identify. And statistically, the Big 5 has shown to work in group settings, in business. It is the most statistically well documented, and it works so far. It's still a personality test, so it's not like 100%, but it's at least a little bit better. But more than the Big 5 theory, you should be using Session 0 instead. Rather than trying to put your players into a box, you can use the Session 0 to actually understand where your players are at and how they are trying to get through things. How do they solve problems? What are they interested in? Why did they come to this table? That's the kind of stuff you get from Session 0, and it helps you paint a better picture of who they are as players and what you can and can't or should and shouldn't do in your sessions. You can plan them a little bit better. You can actually talk to your players about what they are interested in. Just assuming that they want something because they fit into this specific category doesn't truly help understand who they are as a person. It doesn't help anybody figure out what should be going on in the campaign session. That's not really what personality tests do. They're really there to help put your players into a box and corner them into a very specific, you only like this kind of thing, when they don't. So stop doing that. So that's all we have for this week. I hope you understand that you should not be putting your players into boxes by using a personality test, and it should instead be using Session 0, or at the very least the Big 5 test instead of those other ones. Next week we are finally going to be talking about Session 0. You have the lingo, you have the understanding behind it, so that I can actually talk to you about this and what I've actually been working on with this game. That's all we have for this week, so see you next week. Bye.